Everyone, thank you. Thank you again for joining us at CPAL Connect today. Today, we'll be listening in on a session labeled What It Takes to Recruit with Conviction. For this session, CPAL is joined by the president of JCE Consulting, David Turano. But before we launch into today's session, there are a few housekeeping items to cover. First, each session will be recorded and available on demand through CPAL's website. A follow-up email will be sent to all registrants with the recording and other relevant materials. Secondly, we will have a Q&A session following the discussion. All participants have entered the session muted, so please make sure you enter any questions you have in the questions or the discussion tab to the right of your screen right now. And finally, we are on a strict schedule today. To save time for our Q&A session, I will jump on and give a quick little 10-minute warning in case we need it to ensure that we have some time for answering some questions. Please note that at the end of this session, it will promptly end at the scheduled time, and we will eventually have individuals be funneled into the next session within this track. But just as a quick note for all of you as well, within the agenda tab, you will be able to access all the different sessions happening throughout the event. At all times, we will be having 4 different sessions. So feel free to pick and choose whichever the next session you'd like to attend once this one's concluded. And that's it. Without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker for today, David Turano. Dave founded JCE Consulting in 2013. The company is named after his 3 children, Jack, Christopher, and Emma. Dave specializes in communication coaching for business professionals that appreciate straight talk. He has coached and trained leadership professionals of all levels and across many different industries. It's an honor to have you, Dave, and thank you again, and the stage is yours.
Thank you, Jake. Thank you, CPAL, for having me. I really appreciate it. I got to tell everybody, I don't know how many of you are out there. I can't see anyone. You can see me, so hopefully I'm square in my screen right now. I feel like a pilot must feel like a pilot flying through a cloud because I have no visibility into what any of you out there. So I hope this comes across clearly. So I'm going to jump right in and just let you know what we're going to be doing over the next 40 minutes or so. So here's the basic agenda for my talk. We're going to cover why this talk and why this topic is important to me. When Jake came to me, and it was probably about a month ago, he was looking for speakers to come in and talk about what it takes to make a good recruiter a great recruiter. How do we inspire recruiters? And after thinking about it, I said to him, the great recruiters out there that I've worked with, as an employee in a company and as a coach on the outside, they have one thing that nobody else has, and it's conviction. So that's how we created this topic. It's a topic I'm passionate about. So we're going to cover that, why it's important to me, the organization's role into helping instill conviction in their people. We're going to talk about the recruiter's role and what it takes to actually develop conviction in themselves. And then we're going to go over some basic intangibles that I think are important. And then whatever questions you have, I'm happy to answer them. So I hope you have a few. So the reason this topic is important to me is because it's really the foundation of my company. My job and the reason I started this company was I wanted to develop people that communicate more confidently. And when I think about recruiting in general, I think that is the differentiator between a good recruiter and a great recruiter is the best people out there just communicate with more confidence and conviction. And I think it's just been in me since I was a little kid. I remember as a first grader on the playground, there was a big kid on the playground. He used to stand all by himself. His name was Tony. And he didn't know anybody, and he stood in the middle at recess, and he didn't talk to anybody, and nobody talked to him. And I used to go up to this kid every day and just chew his ear off because I didn't want him to feel alone. And then he didn't talk to me. He just kind of stood there and let me yap at him. But eventually he became my best friend. And what I found out later was he was from Germany and he didn't speak English very well. And he was embarrassed that he had an accent. And I didn't know that at the time. And I didn't realize that's why he was standing alone. And we ended up becoming best friends. He became one of the most popular kids in school. And we're still friends to this day. He's since moved back to Germany. And we're connected over social media. And that's really what our communication is like. But I just remember back then how I couldn't stand feeling like this kid couldn't put himself out there. I didn't like him feeling like he was alone. And I think that just kind of bled through my whole life. So that's just a little background around why conviction and confidence is so important to me. And I could give you 100 other stories, but I won't because I'm on a time limit. So let's just dive into this slide. I will not put you to sleep combing through every last word. But I will say this, I do a ton of leadership coaching and development, and I've had the chance to work with all kinds of companies inside and outside of the staffing world. And I think about what it takes to build a great company. If you want employees in general, we'll talk about recruiters in this case. If you want to develop people that have conviction, you owe them something. And if you're a leader in a company listening to me talk right now, one of the things, in my opinion, that you owe them is you need to believe in why your company exists. You need to believe in yourself as a leader and why you're in the market and what it is that you do to help your customers. What is your purpose as an organization? There's so much out there right now around purpose, and sometimes it gets watered down. But the reality is when you believe in what you do, and I certainly believe in what I do, it becomes the guiding light for everybody, not only you as the CEO or the executive, but every single employee. And my 2 cents on this is you have to know what your purpose is, and you can never talk about it enough. So that's the first thing from my perspective that every organization owes its people. The second thing I would say is support. You need to be committed to them. You need to want them to succeed. If you're going to hire people, you've got to hire them with the intention of developing them, with the intention of getting them up to speed. They also play a part in this as well, which I'll cover on the next slide. But too many companies are cycling through people right now. High attrition rates. The recruiters are not getting up to speed in a reasonable fashion. And sometimes I hear when I go into organizations, specifically staffing companies, is they fall in love with the person during the interview, and within about a month, they've mentally given up on them. And the reality is in order to be successful as a recruiter, I got into the business back in the 1997, so I'm probably older than many of you on this call, and I wasn't very good at it. But I got to tell you, what helped me was hanging in there. And what I noticed is after about a year of really struggling, I started to get it. And there are reasons why I started to get it. But part of that was I had a team around me, a management team around me, and colleagues around me that wanted me to be successful. And so that's one of the reasons I stand here today, or I sit here today and talk to you, is had I not been given that purpose and had I not felt supported, I don't know that I could be training and coaching people today. So that's really, really important. The other thing I'm going to just comment on is accountability. And what I didn't include on this slide is a concept called expectations. But accountability is empowering people with responsibility. It's not micromanagement. It's not hovering over people. People need to know that their work matters, and that's where accountability comes in. It's in the form of measurement. It's in the form of conversations. It's in the form of following up and following through with them. But what are you following up and following through on, and what are you measuring? Well, that ties back to the expectations that ideally you set with them. And expectations for a recruiter are all around what are those things that a recruiter needs to be doing to ultimately be successful. So, for example, picking up the phone and talking to people, making sure you have an active social media presence, making sure that you're following up and following through with your candidates. Those are the things that the company owes its people. We got to give them the formula to be successful. Then we have to help them get there. We have to support them and hold them accountable to those things. The last thing I'll just talk about is just communication. It's the lifeblood of what I do. And the bottom line is, as technology has evolved, and I'll comment on this later, technology's brought us closer to people. The person in Europe, I mentioned my friend Tony, he's over in Germany. I'm one message away from talking to him. I'm one screenshot away of just having a conversation with him. It is very easy to connect with people today. But what's missing for me, especially in the staffing industry, and I do have the benefit of training a lot of really, really good staffing companies, but what I've found over the years is communication has eroded. The quality of communication is being clouded by the quality of technology. As technology has evolved, the quality of the conversations have not. We're hiding behind texts and emails, and we're avoiding tough conversations. I think as an organization, every company owes it to their people to tell them the truth, to acknowledge their successes, to recognize their accomplishments, to let them know you appreciate them, but at the same time, let them know when they're not doing the right things. Help them succeed. Let them know when you're concerned. It's not all about, praising them. It's not all about criticizing them. It's being honest with them, and you're in it with them. So that's just a little bit on communication. I only have 25 minutes or 30 minutes here, so I want to be brief. I could go off on that all day long. The next part to developing conviction really, and this is the core, it falls on the recruiter themselves. I will reference one other thing on the previous slide, and the reason I'm so passionate about the organization owning responsibility for somebody else's conviction. I view any organization like a family. And if you were born and raised into a good family, a healthy family, a supportive family, as a child, you're likelier, you have a likelier chance of making it or feeling successful or being happier. And when you're not in a good situation, you're less likely. It's harder to succeed. It's harder to feel good about yourself. So when a recruiter is placed in an environment that's purposeful, that communicates, that holds them accountable, that supports them, they're more likely to hang in there a little bit. Attrition is less likely to plague the organization. So that's why I started with that first. So given that, assuming that everybody on this call works for a really solid organization that cares about their people, now let's take a look at the individual. What is it that the individual needs to bring to the table? I label conviction up top here, but ultimately it's a byproduct of everything else. Conviction to me is an unwavering belief in whatever it is that you do. I have an unwavering belief in what I do. I firmly believe that if I can help people communicate more confidently, whether it's a recruiter, a manager, a CEO, a wife, a husband, a friend, if I can help my kids, if I can help people communicate more confidently, the world will be a better place. I think poor communication is ultimately what's killing us as people. And my belief is that if I can make a small difference there, the world will be a better place. It might feel like pie in the sky, but I'll go to the mat with you on that. So an unwavering belief in what? So as a recruiter, do you have an unwavering belief in yourself? Do you have an unwavering belief in your ability to deliver, in your ability to rely on your team, your salespeople, your management team? Do you feel supported? Do they have your back? Do you have conviction and belief in your company, in your market? Do you believe that you're bringing value to the market? That's what conviction is. It's hard just to get there. I had a client call me yesterday and he said, how do you just make it happen? And I'm like, you don't. You start somewhere. You've got to start somewhere. And that's where performance comes in. You've got to have some sort of production, some sort of consistency, kind of a proven track record will ultimately help cement conviction over time. You may not start with conviction. Some few people do start with it where they just believe no matter what. They're just that no matter what, that's that small segment of people. Other people, it takes them time to get there. So it's helping them achieve small wins with consistency. That can't happen unless there's confidence. And that's the stuff I talk about all the time with my clients. And confidence is trust. If you've ever read any of, there's a book called Speed of Trust by Stephen Covey. It's an excellent book. It's 300 and something pages. It could probably be distilled down to about 100 pages. But basically, it's trust in somebody's character and trust in somebody's competence. That's the core of the book. So when I think of trust as a recruiter, do you trust yourself? Do you trust yourself to pick up the phone and have a healthy conversation? Do you trust yourself that you're going to guide your candidates in the right direction? Do you trust yourself that you'll say to a candidate, hey, you know what? This isn't the right match for you. We need to look for something else. That's what confidence is. It's trust in yourself. The way confidence happens in people is you've got to commit to discipline. This is the core to everything in my mind. And I'm kind of skimming through these first three to get to this discipline piece because I believe it's the formula for everything. If you want to have conviction about yourself as an athlete, Well, part of that is going to come from your ability to win games or win races or whatever. And the way, and in order to win consistently, you've got to believe and feel confident that you can do that. But you don't just get there without what? Discipline. And discipline to me is practice. Practice to do anything. As a runner, I've got to get out there and run a few days a week if I want to run a marathon. A guitar player, I've got to get the guitar in my hand and practice a few days a week if I want to get up on stage and play in a band. As a recruiter, what's missing for me when I go into an organization is the discipline to have a live conversation with another human being. When I talked on the previous page about accountability, I referenced expectations as well. We owe it to our recruiters to tell them what it takes to be confident, what it takes to perform, what it takes to develop conviction. Part of that is a healthy two-way interaction with another human being that you may or may not put on a job. But you're not going to get there unless you're committed to doing these things on a regular basis. What is important to be successful as a recruiter? It's healthy two-way communication with your candidate pipeline. Some of them might be working for you. Some of them might work for you in the future. Some of them might never work for you. But technology has created the illusion that our networks are stronger than they are. We might have 2,000 contacts, 5,000 contacts. How many of those contacts know who you are? How many of them think of you when they want to hire somebody? How many of them think of you when they're contemplating their next job or when their assignment's about to come to an end? How many of them see you as the person they go to for advice or counsel when their career is off track or they want to try something new or they want more money? The job in the way you become kind of that central point for this community of candidates is to have the discipline to constantly reach out to your market when you don't have jobs for them, when you don't need them for anything. The success of the best recruiters that I know in the industry are known by the industry. The community knows them, and it starts not because they just showed up with a sign and put it out there, here I am, I'm a recruiter. It's because they took the time to get to know people, even when they didn't need those people. They took the time to follow up and follow through with those people and stay in touch with them. That's the other thing I would just say is the art of staying in touch, the art of making sure that you're not forgotten. So those are the things that I would highly recommend. If you want your recruiters, if you're a recruiter listening to me or you're managing recruiters, the disciplines that a recruiter needs to develop are going to tie back to anything to do with a healthy two-way conversation, whether it's by phone, whether it's by Zoom or Teams or Google Meets or whatever it is that you use. Are you constantly maintaining an open line of communication with a candidate pool that trusts you, that views you as the advisor, that views you as the go-to person to ultimately help them navigate their career? And that's the discipline that I'd ask you to look at. If I think about some of the recruiters that I've worked with in the past that struggle, it's either because they just don't want to do the job and they took the job because it was just something, a company was hiring, or they're reluctant to commit to the discipline because they don't know what to say on the phone. They don't want to sound stupid. They feel like they're bothering somebody. They're not sure that they understand technology at a level where they can actually carry a conversation with somebody. And as a result of those things, they ignore the discipline. They avoid it. They hide behind email and text and things of that nature. Our job as leaders and companies is to help our people get more comfortable adopting the discipline, because once they commit to that, once they learn what it takes to be successful, confidence sets in, performance starts to become more consistent, and conviction sets in. And once conviction sets in, you'll call anybody, you'll talk to anybody, you'll feel as purposeful as the company felt when it was created. And hopefully that purpose did exist. You won't be able to wait to get somebody on the phone. You won't be able to wait to talk to a client or a candidate because you truly believe in your value. So I'm off on a little bit of a soapbox here, and I just want to be conscious of my time. I want to go to the next slide and talk about things that I find in the best recruiters, those that have conviction. And quite frankly, It's in any successful person that I know, client, family, friend. Everybody's got technology in the staffing business. Every time I turn around, there's something new. There's some new way of attracting candidates, accumulating resumes, connecting with people, accessing their direct line, cell phones, emails. Everybody's got that stuff. It's the intangibles that separate everybody who has the same tools. Everyone's in the same foot race for the same people. But the people that succeed, those that develop the conviction, are the ones that have the ability to establish true connection with people. They're actually interested in people. They're not necessarily viewing the person as a means to an end. They view the person as a future lifetime relationship. That's what causes us to establish true connection. They really want to understand the other person, whether they put them on a job or not. So how often are we taking the time to make a true connection with people? Just because we have a great job that we need to cover doesn't mean that this perfect candidate is ready to take it. It doesn't mean that they want it. That doesn't mean that we can't stay in touch with them and maintain that connection with them. The other thing that the best of the best do is they protect their time. They don't waste time doing things that don't matter. They make sure that the calls they need to make are in their calendars. The people they need to talk to, they talk to them. They don't delay what needs to get done. They don't spend their time surfing the web when they need to clear somebody for a job. They won't spend extra time on a call with somebody who doesn't warrant their time. They move on quickly from those that aren't committed. They hang in there a little bit longer with those that are serious, that could be that lifetime candidate for them. So managing and protecting time is key. The third thing, which is just incredibly passionate to me, and it's actually one of my values as a human being, it's a value of my company, it's something I talk to every one of my clients about, is responsiveness. And I can't stress this enough, how important it is, especially today when everybody's got a cell phone, everybody is texting, everybody's hooked to these things. And yet there are many people out there that are unresponsive. I had a client a number of years ago who handed a client relationship to one of his salespeople in the staffing industry, by the way. And the customer made the introduction, said, so-and-so is going to be managing your account, and he's going to take good care of you. And a month later, the customer called my client who owned the company and said, I'm sorry, after all this time, we're moving on from you guys. And my client was shocked, and he said, why? How did this happen? And it's because the person he handed the relationship to had not responded to the client in a month. Multiple attempts from the client, emails, calls, and texts from the client. Can I speak with you? And a deal had gone sideways. What happened was the salesperson, staffing salesperson, said to the CEO, I was afraid to call him back. I didn't have an answer for him. I didn't know what to say. So I ignored his calls. I ignored his texts. I ignored his emails. And so sometimes we're not responsive because we're afraid to deal with what's uncomfortable. Sometimes we're not responsive because we don't care. Sometimes we're not responsive because we're busy doing other things. Because we all have these phones and everybody is as connected as they are, it can go sideways quickly if you're dealing with a candidate or a client in this market and you don't at least acknowledge their attempt to reach you, if you don't provide them timely feedback, or you don't acknowledge if they call you on a Friday, do you wait until Monday to get back to them? Many do. I think the differentiator between the great and the good is responsiveness. The fourth thing here is to pay attention to the unspoken. The recruiters that have conviction are those that they're in complete control of every conversation. They're not manipulating people. But what they understand is how difficult it is for many of the candidates they're talking to tell the truth, or to come out and just be honest and say, I don't like this job, or I have concerns about this commute, or I'm not sure that I want to work in that environment. Very few people will come out and tell you what's not right in the conversation. And many recruiters are out there trying to sell candidates into companies and sell candidates into jobs that ultimately fall through. The best recruiters out there pay attention to the unspoken. They know what their candidates aren't saying to them. They take the time and make it okay for the candidate to say, hey, you know what? I'm not sure that this is the right fit for me, or I have some concerns about this manager. It's and if the candidate doesn't bring those things up, the best recruiters bring it up for them and make it all right to talk about those things. They pay attention to the unspoken. The last thing I'll say is they confront what's difficult. They don't delay bad news. They don't deliver bad news electronically via text or email. They pick up the phone, they schedule a virtual meeting, and they tell people the truth. And the reason they're able to do that more often than not is because they work for an organization that tells its people the truth. They don't hide behind technology. They don't mask a layoff because of this. They tell people the truth. We make these decisions because your performance isn't what it needs to be. Just like with the candidate. So you don't feel bad for the candidate. If the candidate didn't interview well, they tell them. Unfortunately, you fell short. And that's what the differentiator is. You can't have conviction if you're hiding from the truth. So they're willing to confront what's difficult. They know how to structure a difficult conversation without making the other person feel bad. And they know how to do it in a way where the person, the candidate in this case, says, thank you for telling me that. I don't hear that from anybody else. So these are some things that don't show up on a stat sheet. These are some things that when I think about the best recruiters that I've worked with, recruiters that I've managed, recruiters that I coach now, they do all of these things. And they weren't just born this way. They got there because of their discipline, because of their commitment, because of their willingness to do it over and over again over time. And that's what's allowed them to build candidates. That's what's allowed their candidates to find them over the years. They're not necessarily just going out there and surfing the web and posting jobs, hoping to find that new candidate that nobody else knows. They do these things because they establish relationships with people and they retain them because of their willingness to stay in touch and keep the lines of communication open. So I don't know if I'm over my time here. It's 10:15. I think I got about 30 minutes in there. So I'm gonna stop. I'm not gonna go on and on here. If you have any questions, I'm happy to take them. Jake, I don't know if you're still there.
Yeah, can you hear me okay, Dave?
I can. You want me to stop sharing here?
Yeah, you can go ahead and stop sharing now.
All right.
Perfect. So the chat throughout this presentation has been very active. We've had multiple people ask for copies of your slides as well. So the overall interest is great. And we do have some questions already. And I'll go ahead and jump right into it. Great first question too. Yeah, no worries. Okay, here we go. The first question. Good morning. I am a 4-decade alcoholic, sober 9 years, and working as an addiction recovery coach and HR mentor. Substance use has increased since the pandemic, and the role of HR is no longer administrative, but more systematic. Communication in the virtual world. David, how vital is the role of difficult conversations and the soft skills that are needed for wellness?
Oh, this is a great question. I almost feel like I feel like when I get a question like that, I have a world of responsibility in my head. But, I grew up in an environment, not my immediate family, but my extended family, where there's, a ton of alcoholism and abuse and depression and all these things. And so I firmly believe, my 2 cents for what it's worth, I'm not a doctor, is that I think a lot of our problems as people in this country, in this world, are directly tied back to our inability to communicate effectively because we're afraid, we're ashamed, we don't want to be embarrassed. I think that we spend more time ignoring problems and stuffing problems away, or just not dealing with things. And I think honestly, the world would be a better place inside a company. We'll just keep it inside of a company. Our employees will be happier people when we make it okay for them to talk about stuff, and we know how to manage those conversations. Everybody's got problems. Everybody I know. I've coached clients that have lost children. I've coached clients that have lost their spouses. I've coached clients that have had brain tumors. I've coached clients who have had suicide in their office. And every one of those people and every one of those companies has moved through those things because they talked about them. So I don't know if that answers the question, and it's probably well beyond my area of expertise, but that's how I feel about it.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. The next question is, can you please brief more on a few hurdles which you have faced while sourcing and how you managed it?
So I haven't sourced in almost 20 years. So I started as a recruiter in the 90s. And I think what I did back then, I don't know that it applies in the same way. And I've been out of the staffing industry for 12 years, even though I coach and train staffing people now. The thing I will say, though, is my approach to sourcing back then, when I bring it up to people now, it's almost like nobody's doing it, but it was a very grassroots approach. At the time, and again, I don't know if this is going to be relevant to the person who asked, but I had to open an area. I'm from Boston, and I had an opportunity down south in Virginia, and I had no candidates. I had a few clients. I had no candidates, nor did I have any recruiters that wanted to work on my stuff. So I had to go out and find my own people. So at the time, Dice and Monster were the places those were the websites I had to go find people. And every single day I would go on, I would do an area code search, and I would call any technical candidate that had a solid background, whether I had a job for them or not. I introduced myself to them, and I stayed in touch with them. I ended up building a database of a few thousand people. Whoops, my timer just went off. Ended up building a database of a few thousand people, and quite frankly, so many of them still, no, not so many, a good many of them stay in touch with me today. I still talk to those people from the 90s. So it was a grassroots approach. I don't know if that's the answer you were looking for.
Great. We have another question too. Thank you all again for sending in these questions. David, you spoke about mental health and depression. Should candidates ask about mental health programs and give importance to it while choosing a role?
That's a tough one. You're asking if the candidate should ask the recruiter?
Should candidates ask about the mental health programs and give importance to it while choosing a role?
I mean, I'm a transparent person, so I don't think asking the question is a bad thing. I think that it's worth asking.
Yeah.
Whether the recruiter can handle it or not, or how they react to it, you have no control over that. But asking certainly.
Yeah, and I agree. I mean, at the end of the day, transparency is key, right? It's better just to be honest and kind of get things out there and get to the solution sooner rather than later.
Absolutely.
There was a part 2 question to that as well. And also, how can candidates ensure that the workforce has a good culture before joining a session?
So the candidate, you're talking about the companies, the job they might ultimately take. How do they know that company has a good culture?
That's what it sounds like. Yeah.
Okay. So much of that, part of it you can do on your own. I mean, if you're out there networking and building relationships on your own, you probably know people who have come through those organizations. And even if you don't know them, you might reach out and say, hey, what was it like to work there? How did you feel about it? Why did you leave? Why do you stay? And build relationships. It never hurts to do that. The second thing is most of the relationships, if you're going to use a recruiter, there's a salesperson, a counterpart, who's responsible for opening that client relationship and nurturing that client relationship. To what extent do they know that? Do they just get an MSA in place and, hey, look, we got all these jobs, go fill them? Or are they taking the time to navigate that customer? Are they taking the time to know the people that they need to know so that they can relay to the recruiter what the culture is all about? Have they introduced their recruiters to their clients so that the recruiter can share those things with the candidates? Short answer, that's where my head goes right out of the gate.
Great. Thank you. And we will end this off with one more question. And this is regarding the use of technology. So how do you think technology has impacted the ability to build these relationships, both positive and negatively? I know we spoke about this a little bit before the session as well. It's definitely an interesting topic. So we'd love to hear your thoughts.
On the positive side, it is much easier to connect with people. I mean, Jake, you and I feel like I know you because we've had some of these calls. Yeah. I started a podcast a year and a half ago. I've talked to so many people that I've never met before because of that technology. So it's incredibly powerful, but we're still people. And if you think that being connected over technology equals a relationship, you're kidding yourself. So I think it's don't allow you know, I've got 3,500 LinkedIn connections. Don't allow yourself to believe that 3,500 people know you and want to talk to you. It just means you've got 3,500 people that happen to be connected on LinkedIn. What are you doing to be known? Are they thinking of you? So are you taking the time to talk with them, to interact with them, even when you don't need them? And are they responding to you? Are they proactively reaching out to you? That's the key to me, is when the market starts calling you, you know you've done something good. When you're always scrambling to go find, that means people don't know who you are. My 2 cents.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you again, David, for one, presenting, and two, also kind of engaging with our audience with some of the great questions they've had. Really appreciate it. For all the members in the audience, thank you, of course, for participating in this session. You know, without all of your support and contribution, the Q&A would be a little boring. So I appreciate the great questions. And Dave, thank you again for being, you know, helping us kickstart this first session in CPAL Connect. For all the attendees, the next session will start in exactly 7 minutes, so right at 10:30 a.m. Eastern time. Feel free to check out the agenda tab to look at all the different sessions, and right around 10:30, 10:31 or so, the next round of 4 sessions will begin. So thank you again. Thank you, Dave, and looking forward to the upcoming sessions as well.
Yeah, and thanks everybody. I see all your messages on the side. I'm so slow to type, but I appreciate all the questions. Very thoughtful, and hope you got something out of it.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.